You're listening to the Millionacres Podcast. Our mission at Millionacres is to educate and empower investors to make great decisions and achieve real estate investing success. We provide regular content and perspective for everyone, from those just starting out to seasoned pros with decades of experience. At Millionacres, we work every day to help you demystify real estate investing.
Hello, I'm Deidre Willard, an editor at Millionacres. Thank you so much for tuning into the Millionacres Podcast. Today, my guest is Jonas Bordo of Dwellsy. I first encountered him when he sent me a note about his advocacy to do away with the security deposit for renters. Okay, I was intrigued there. So we're going to talk about that and much more on the podcast today. Jonas is the founder of Dwellsy, which is a growing rental platform for listing and finding rentals. Well, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Deirdre. It's a pleasure.
Well, let's talk about the security deposit thing, because you believe it's outmoded. You believe there are better options. Tell me your side of the story.
You know, honestly, this is one of the most frustrating things for both sides of the market, for both landlords and renters. Obviously, for the renters, it's a huge amount of money to have to come up with, and it's your funds at risk when you don't really have a lot of control in that situation. So it's often a source of friction and frustration for the renter. For the landlord, at this point, there's so much regulatory risk around it, and it has to be handled in such careful ways in most markets that it's actually more trouble than it's worth. Plus, it just introduces this real chance of, what I just say is, bad behavior, if you will. Is the carpet really done? Or, was it the renter who did that? Or was it just, 3-4 years old and it's time for new carpet? Well, if you've got a $2,000 security deposit sitting there, it's awfully tempting to tap that. If you're the landlord, if you're the renter, it's very easy to look at that and say, hey, the carpet was already done when I moved in. It's that sort of thing that's on the margin that's really subjective, where I think there's just so much friction around it. And for so many reasons, just affordability issues, logistics, challenges, friction, it's time to move on. And now there's finally great tools available as an alternative to that.
So some of those tools are things like rental insurance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's rental insurance policies. There's different types of approaches from a technical standpoint, but fundamentally what they do is they get a third party to take some payments from the renters and basically say that third party is now responsible for any damage that the renter might do to that property, and that third party gets to stand in the middle. And if the landlord has a problem, usually they can get access to more funds than they would have gotten from the security deposit if the renter genuinely does some significant damage. And the renter is not standing there as the backstop, just in case it's stuff on the margin or doesn't really, it's not really their doing. There's a more balanced approach.
Yeah, and it definitely takes away that issue. If you're a renter, it's sort of like when you rent a car. I think you feel like you want to take pictures of everything so that you don't have to have that fight later on and be like, no, this was here when I got here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's just such a frustrating process, and nobody can really litigate that effectively in this group. Neither renter nor landlord is well positioned to do that. So it's better just to have a third party to do that.
Absolutely. And the other thing that it really brings up, I think it highlights the issue that we've seen all along, which is how much rules vary by state. And we see this across every aspect of rentals, homeownership, anything. The way that rules vary by state, I think, is so frustrating. We saw it with the eviction moratoriums and how they were all done. We're not even close to being through that. I feel like that is another factor when you look at security deposits.
Oh, it absolutely is. The patchwork quilt of having to deal with all the different situations. And you've got renters who are moving from one place to another. They don't know the law. It's not fair to ask them to understand the law and what the landlord's responsibilities are. And 9 times out of 10, the landlords don't understand the law either. So you've got people on both sides kind of guessing, getting it wrong. And it's not to anybody's benefit in this situation. That patchwork quilt is such a problem in the whole rental market.
Totally agree with that. Another place that comes into play is rental data. I have been talking about this for a long time. I get so frustrated with the fact that there's not an MLS, there's not a system. Data standards in rentals vary widely. How are you dealing with wrangling all that kind of data to help consumers find rentals?
Yeah, effectively that's what we're building. There's north of 10 million individual landlords in the United States. A huge fragmentation across the entire industry. Your average landlord owns 1 or 2 rental units. In the United States, they don't have any structured data. There's no structured way that they're thinking about their data. And there's never been an MLS that's really stepped into that void and filled that gap. And if you look at the legacy platforms that have provided services to consumers who are looking for rentals or services to landlords who are looking for renters, they've been focused on, with the exception of Craigslist, being a paid service where you have to buy a classified ad. And what we've seen is just most landlords are not willing to buy a classified ad. So those big platforms might have 5, 6, 7% of the inventory if they're wildly successful. The biggest names in the industry historically have had that. Dwellsy's tried to remove all the barriers to listing with us with the intent of really building that single destination. And we're north of 20% of data across the country and growing rapidly.
Interesting, because I was talking to a coworker the other day. We were talking about this problem, and he was saying that he was on one service and his wife was on another service. They were looking the exact same place. They were getting completely different listings, and it's such a large problem to solve. What do you think about the single-family rental market? Right now, we're in the midst of this single-family rental massive shift. Some of the bigger players are starting to make their own platforms. Traditionally, that's a 1 or 2 unit investor, like you mentioned before. How do you capture all of that when that's such a big part of the market?
Yeah, it is. Most people are not necessarily aware of this, but roughly a third of the U.S. rental inventory is single-family homes for rent, and that's been the case for a long time. So you're talking about 15, 16 million properties across the country. Another third is small format multifamily. So your 2-unit building or your 4-unit building, that sort of thing. So that's most of the inventory in the United States, and most of that is owned by individual investors. So aggregating that is hugely problematic. A couple of things have happened. One, there's a lot of good property management software solutions for small landlords now. There are tools, if you just have 1 or 2 or 3 properties, there are tools that you can use. If you have, 20 to 50 properties, there are tools you can use that are great in that range. And that really has created some professionalization around many of those individual landlords and the very small property management companies that use those software tools as well. But still, roughly half of the U.S. inventory is not using any software like that. There's no structured data. So, rolling that up and really getting access to that for the benefit of renters and to help landlords fill their properties and get other services they need, that's going to be a huge challenge ahead for us.
Interesting, because I still see people using Craigslist. I still see, a for rent sign written in marker out in front of a house. How do you reach out to those smaller individual landlords? I mean, is there sort of like an advocacy campaign associated with that?
Yeah, so it's funny. Our most successful advocacy campaigns so far have been our consumer advertising to reach renters. Seems to catch a lot of individual landlords as well. It's as they're thinking about listing their places, most people are too scared about Craigslist to use it. When I was looking for an apartment years ago and I used Craigslist, it seemed like there was some sketchy stuff on there, but now we're at the point where 70-80% of the listings are fraudulent, so you can expect to see fraud nonstop on there. And there's also been fraud targeting landlords on Craigslist, which is really scary for that group as well. So I see fewer and fewer. I was expecting, actually, when I launched Dwellsy, to hear a lot about Craigslist from others, and I don't. What I hear about is yard signs. I hear about local newspapers taking classified ads from people again, which like back to 1978. And so, we're working to bring those folks to Dwellsy and create a path to listing in a way that gets everybody their places rented in a very cost-effective way.
What are you seeing on rental rates right now? We saw during the pandemic rental rates in some areas, San Francisco, New York, went down. They seem to be coming back up. What have you seen?
Oh my goodness, Deirdre! It's the craziest rental market I've ever seen this past 18 months in so many different ways. And the one thing about it is that almost defies logic and definition is you have to look at the whole country almost neighborhood by neighborhood. You think about the way I've started to think about it is you've got the large coastal markets, the San Franciscos and the New Yorks that are so expensive, and everybody just ran away from those central city locations. And we saw rental prices plummet as a result of that. And where did they go? Well, they didn't generally go out to the country or, to completely random locations. They tended to go to the next tier of cities. And they tended to try to take spaces where they had more outdoor space, where their dollar went further. So you saw somebody from San Francisco moving to the suburbs of Seattle, for example, and creating, new pressure in that submarkets in Seattle or submarkets in Boise, for example. And then you get this other overlay of during COVID, people wanted to be further away from transit centers, further away from population centers, and have a little bit more outdoor space. Now what we're seeing is people flooding back into those markets, particularly in the affluent cohort. You look at workforce housing in Kansas City, it's hardly changed at all. It's been pretty steady through COVID, and it's pretty steady today. You look at high-end premium housing in most cities, and it had a huge crash, and now it's coming back, especially that transit-optimized stuff that so many landlords have been building over the last few years. Single-family homes continue to be massively in demand, and people are coming at it from a bunch of directions. Individual, owners and occupiers of those properties have driven the price up and the supply down. Plus, you've got corporate entrance into that market, the institutional owners, Blackstones of the world, coming in to, take positions in that market, which has taken has gotten a lot of press, but in terms of how much they actually control, it's just a tiny slice of that market. So I don't know how big a factor that really is, except in places like Phoenix, where they've taken 15 or 20% of the market in some months, apparently.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think you're right. I think that those big platforms get a lot of hype partly because they're amassing billions of dollars, and that's always going to attract a headline or two. Yeah. But it really is still mostly a individual landlord business in single family rentals for the most part. You're in San Francisco, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
So what have you seen? I mean, I love that city, but I know it's been going through its pains. What do you feel right now about your home market?
It's tough. In the city itself, we saw a lot of people leave and a lot of people shift out of the market, not for the long term. I think there were some very well publicized departures of folks, and people have gone to Miami or gone to Austin with some publicity attached to it, which was, entertaining and frustrating for those of us who are still here. But if you look at the overall demographics, they haven't really shifted that much. What we did see is people leaving the center of the city, and now people returning. And we did see some things, when you have a dense urban environment, there are certain things we count on. It's nice to have people around you when you're walking down the street in a big city. When there's no people around you, it starts to feel a little more dangerous, and in some cases it is. So we definitely saw an uptick in that. In the suburbs of San Francisco, where I live down on the peninsula, pricing has just been insane. Houses turn immediately. I can't remember the last time I saw a sign on a house that said "for sale." They all say they all start off saying "coming soon," and then they go straight to "sold."
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Same thing in my neighborhood here in Alexandria, Virginia. I see "coming soon," I see "pending," and then it's gone. So it's like, was it ever on the market? Maybe not.
Exactly. Yeah, I do see some rentals. There are definitely some rentals in the neighborhood, and those have a tendency to linger a little bit longer. But the for sale stuff, man, goes fast.
Except for the condos. I'm noticing the condo market is just a little sluggish, especially bigger buildings, bigger, older buildings in particular. I'm seeing some softness, not just here in my market, but elsewhere. It seems like older buildings, large buildings where there's just like a lobby, big, tall buildings, that seems to be the only segment of the market that's maybe a little bit less desirable right now for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, what's the commonality there? It's shared common areas. It's being in an elevator with strangers, and I think that's a reminder that the pandemic's not over yet. People are still making decisions based on pandemic risks, especially in this moment when we have Delta coming and, getting everybody a little more scared than we've been for a few months.
So you mentioned Boise. I feel like I need to have a drinking game. Anybody mentions Boise, because we all keep talking about Boise because it's where so many people from California are going. But are there other markets that you've seen based on your data on the site that you've seen search traffic go up?
It's so funny. The nature of our traffic today is all over the country, and it's hard to pinpoint any one area. I definitely see places where outdoor space is common, and where the weather is good, ticking up. Lots of San Diego lately. That's been very popular. A lot of places in the mountain country have been very popular. A lot of California destinations have been very popular in general. With our site. Disproportionate amount of searching in Hawaii. I have a few guesses as to why that is, but, good place to be for a bunch of different reasons. But, those are some of the places that have been, disproportionately popular recently. But it really, it's funny, from week to week, we'll have some places. We had a big week in Pittsburgh the other week. It's like, what's going on in Pittsburgh? I don't know.
Are you rolling out Dwellsies on a area by area basis, or is it all across the country right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. One we've wrestled with from the beginning. My original hypothesis was that we would roll it out area by area. But when we launched, we had as much inventory as the original classifieds folks, and now we're at about 2 to 3 times those legacy folks in terms of the inventory on our platform. So we're credible in every market, and pretty much in most markets we've got more inventory than anyone else. So that just continues to provide firm foundation as we expand.
Is that one of the things that you're sort of tracking, is how much and can you track how much inventory that your competitors have?
Yeah, it's not perfect. One of the things that's traditionally been a challenge, we're a little nuts at Dwellsy about making sure that we're only showing actual available inventory. And one of the challenges with this space is a lot of the units shown on older platforms are not available. So that makes it a little bit complicated to track what's actually out there. You mentioned Craigslist earlier. If you look on there, the rational posting strategy for a fraudster or a legitimate landlord on Craigslist is to post 3 times a day, 7 days a week. So each available unit might show up 21 times in the course of a week. So you can't just count the number of listings and assume that that's the amount of listings on there. Likewise on, the older sites, there's a lot of, could be as much as 60-70% unavailable. So we try to track to that, and usually the sites will tell you in a given region how much they have available. You have to do a little personal math to try to figure out what's actually available. We've gotten pretty good at that here.
Interesting. I think what you mentioned a really good point there about listings that aren't available. I've seen that before with rentals. It's funny. I think we used to see that a lot more on Zillow back in the day when they were getting data from a variety of different partners. That problem seemed to go away for them. Rentals, it's just, like we said before, it's just such a problem with data that I think you're right. That's a real problem on a lot of different sites.
No, I agree. And I have to give Zillow a lot of credit. They've gotten much tighter around their, just showing available stuff. They still have some old listings on there, but they're pretty tight on that. And they're actually, usually who we're looking at to see, how we compare from an inventory standpoint.
It takes so many engineers to wrangle all of this data.
It does.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the eviction moratoriums. It's something that's on my mind lately. We just recently published some data on Millionacres about talking about that patchwork effect, how, it's affecting markets disproportionately. Does that have any impact on your site? Are you hearing anything from the landlords you work with?
Yeah, I hear a lot about that from both landlords and renters. It's a very frequent point of conversation, and frankly, an incredible source of frustration. I think there was an opportunity at the beginning of the pandemic to do a good job about covering both sides of the market and really thinking through the impact. And it wouldn't have been that complicated, but the worst way to do it was to have a patchwork national moratorium that was poorly described and only covered renters, didn't cover landlords. And that's what we went with. So, I talked to a huge number of renters who don't know what their rights are, don't know how to pursue them. cannot penetrate the bureaucracy in order to get access to funds to which they're entitled. And the landlords, the big landlords are fine. It's frustrating for them when somebody's not paying the rent, but they've got enough balance between people who are in order to cover the people who aren't. The ones it's really hurting is the individual landlords, the person with 1 or 2 units who is counting on that for their income. And they have a renter who, in most cases is in good faith unable to pay, can't figure out how to access help. And that landlord is now, in some cases, at risk of losing their property because of it. It's, we really managed to find kind of the worst way to handle it that we could possibly imagine, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like we were almost getting to the end of it. And now with the Delta variant, it's very hard to say what's going to happen next. But I think fundamentally, you made that point about we didn't support the individual landlords in the way we should have. And I think so many of them didn't understand what their tenants would have access to, and then tried to get help. We have one landlord on our team who was, trying to get access to things for her tenant and had a really tough time. So very frustrating situation all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, we've made it, the proof level for renters to be able to prove that they can't afford it has gotten so high in so many markets. And then on the landlord side, there's some, here in California, the initial decision was that they were only going to reimburse landlords for 80%, which, sounds good in the press. And, oh yeah, we're going to stick it to the landlords by 20%, but they'll be fine because they'll get something. The rational choice for that landlord is just not participate in that process then. And so you ended up with nobody being able to get access to anything. And, we just saw things like that all across the country. It was just so hard for everybody. Could have been so much easier.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's take a quick break here.
Like what you're hearing? Get more real estate investing news and advice from Millionacres on Instagram at Millionacres and on Twitter at Millionacres_co.
During our break today, we are excited to have Millionacres lead investment analyst Matt Argersinger here to speak briefly about one of our newest services, Real Estate Winners. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So what is Real Estate Winners and who is it for?
Well, I like to think of Real Estate Winners as our answer to Stock Advisor in the real estate market. It is a service that provides recommendations on publicly traded real estate investment trusts and real estate companies. So it's a pretty big universe out there. There's over 200 REITs to choose from, and probably dozens, if not hundreds, of real estate companies are in our universe. And we provide regular investment recommendations as well as commentary on the market, educational material. And it's really designed to get anyone who's interested in investing and learning about real estate started.
So is it geared toward new investors or is it more for seasoned pros?
I think Real Estate Winners can serve both. I think if you're a new investor, maybe you're just getting started with stocks and you want to learn more about how to add real estate to your portfolio, great place to start. If you're a seasoned investor and just thinking, okay, how can I diversify my portfolio, maybe reduce the volatility in my portfolio, maybe add some income to my portfolio, then I think Real Estate Winners is a great solution for that cohort as well.
Fantastic. What are the benefits of being a member of Real Estate Winners?
Number one benefit is day one when you join, you get our top 10 investment ideas at the moment. So really right from the beginning, you know what our 10 best ideas in the publicly traded real estate market are. And then going forward on a monthly basis, you'll get a new recommendation, sometimes more than one new recommendation, as well as regular content that we're coming out. We're covering our past recommendations, providing updates, and talking about the real estate market. So it's really the full package.
Perfect. So what do you need to get started?
Really all you need is a discount brokerage account. So if you're used to buying stocks, and you probably already have that. If you haven't bought stocks in the past, of course, just open a discount brokerage account. These days, you don't even have to pay commissions. It's fantastic. So it really couldn't be easier to get started investing with Real Estate Winners.
Sounds fantastic. So how can people sign up?
Sure. They can head over to real.fool.com. That's real.fool.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
I'm back with Jonas Bordo of Dwellsy. We're talking about rental properties. All right, I got to ask, how does Dwellsy make their money? You said you're sort of against pay-to-play rental platforms. So where does the income come from?
Yeah, so the fundamental principle that we're building is we need to be able to have all of the inventory. That's the necessary precursor to really serve the renter and really serve the landlord well. So if we're going to get that, you're not going to get there by taking the traditional path and charging an access fee, standing at that intersection and taking a toll from one side or the other side. You really need to remove those barriers. So Dwellsy has no charge for listing. There's no charge for leases or leads or any of the things that they've traditionally charged landlords for, and no charge for the renters either. So where are we going to make money? We offer a variety of products for renters and for landlords that are kind of premium services, if you will. So instant text alerts for renters, fair housing compliance for landlords, or some of our early products. There's a lot more coming down the pipe as we build out this platform.
So when I was looking on your site, I saw a pop-up for Dwellsy Gold. Is that one of the things that you're trying out?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be a product that's coming soon. And it's, really, if you're a renter and you're looking for an edge in the market, it can be really hard to find the right place. And there's a variety of different ways that we can give a renter an edge. And we're pulling out all the stops there to develop a product that's really going to give that renter that edge in the market that'll give them the advantage and help them find the great place as quickly and efficiently as they can, while making the process a little more enjoyable.
Well, that's interesting too, because thinking about single family rentals, one of the things that's different between, if you make an appointment with an apartment place, they're going to have multiple apartments. But single family rentals, they're each their own little thing. They've, where it is, lot size, all of that stuff. It's so idiosyncratic that I think that there is that scramble. If that's the house you want, you got to get there first, because these individual landlords, they don't really have the patience to go through 20, 30, 40 applications. There's a very early stop point, I think, with individual landlords that you don't get with multifamily.
Yeah. No, that's incredibly true. Your traditional multifamily, exactly as you described. You walk in there for your appointment, they might have 10 units available because they always have 10 units available, and that's the nature of it. And those units are fairly interchangeable. But that's not where most people live. Most people live in unique places, single-family rentals or small format places or a condo that they're renting from somebody. And for that sort of thing, when it comes up, it goes fast. Sometimes that landlord might have 5 or 10 inquiries within an hour of listing it. And that's, our instant text alert product has been really popular with renters for that reason, is because it allows them to be first to inquire on a property, which is a pretty big advantage to get. And that's first of one of the advantages that we're offering to renters in our platform, and there'll be more to come beyond that. But you're exactly right. For that kind of thing, to find the place that's in the right school district, that'll take your dog, that has the right number of bedrooms and the work from home space that you need. When you find that, you got to jump on it.
Yeah. And, I know in Seattle, they have that first come, first serve law for renters. I'm thinking maybe that's going to spread out a little bit. Are you keeping track of all of those different kinds of laws that are popping up all over the country?
There are as many sets of rental laws as there are municipalities, and sometimes more. So there's tens of thousands of different sets of laws around renting across the country. It's incredibly hard to keep track of them all. No individual landlord can do it. Really no human can do it, frankly. So we actually have an AI system that we're teaching to, start first with federal fair housing and then broaden out to tackle some of the more significant local programs to really try to understand what do landlords need to do. And that'll be one of the services we offer down the line, is a toolkit to help landlords actually be legal instead of just, hope for the best. Hopefully we'll get involved in some advocacy to bring some reality down the line and some standardization so that renters can know what to expect, and we can have some transparency for them as well as for landlords.
Well, that brings up another question that I wanted to ask you, which is fair housing laws. I talk to landlords and they're worried about what to put in ads. They know that there's certain things they're not supposed to put in there, but it's getting more and more challenging. What kind of advice are you giving to people? Do you look at ads to screen them? How does that work?
Yeah, they should be worried. There's a lot of risk there. And it's again, incredibly difficult to be compliant, almost impossible. Some of the core principles are you shouldn't be marketing to the individual, and you shouldn't be in any way thinking of one of the most basic marketing lessons that every marketer is taught in school, is, market to the individual that you want to sell to. You can't do that in this space. The other thing you can't do is show any preference for any group, even in a secondary way. Your property is next door to a Catholic church. You can't mention that. You've just shown a preference for somebody who's Catholic over somebody who's not. The floors are soundproof, so it's great for toddlers and, won't make as much noise. Well, you've just shown a preference for somebody with kids. You can't say those kinds of things. Again, we're working on this AI algorithm that we will roll out as a tool to help landlords stay legal. But there's, again, a huge amount of legal complexity just around that. Just helping people be legal is legally complex. We're not lawyers here, and we no plans to become lawyers. But what we just want to do is have a really clean, really fair listing platform that gives every renter a fair shot at every rental. And allows the right person, the best person to find each place that suits them. And that's a challenging goal given the complexity of our legal infrastructure.
True, and especially since so many of these mom and pop landlords, if this is their, one or two houses, maybe they, they're doing this once every few years probably. They don't have the time or inclination to keep up on all of this stuff. This isn't their core job. They've probably got other jobs and other responsibilities. So I think that's part of the problem there too, is that people, when they're scared, I've noticed, will tend to err on the side of just putting the most short one sentence, it's a 2-bedroom house. It has a fireplace, because they are afraid that if they, get descriptive, they might describe their way into trouble.
Yeah. No, and I think, there is something to that. We're not selling shoes here. People are looking for a place that suits them. They know what they are looking for. Each place is unique. Even in a 300 unit community where, each floor plate is identical, there's a difference between being on the 3rd floor and the 4th floor. And that's going to matter to somebody. In many ways, I think what we're doing here is retreating to structured data and being able to say, like, yes, we take dogs. Yes, this is the square footage of the place. Yes, these are the amenities that are offered. Really meets the need, and getting away from the Craigslist style long form prose description, which really isn't necessary. Again, we're not selling shoes, we're not selling perfume, we're not selling things like that are like mostly marketing in terms of the value. The value here is a roof over your head and a home for you and your family and your loved ones. It's a very different character in terms of what it is. And I don't think it needs a lot of that embellishment.
Okay, you mentioned dogs. Wanted to ask you your opinion on pet rent, pet deposits. We talked about security deposits before. What do you think about pet deposits?
I'm an economist by training, Deirdre, and so I think wherever you can allocate the cost to the people who are creating that cost, often things work out better. And that's kind of a wonky way to describe it, but ultimately there are costs to pets at a property. Those costs come in greater wear and tear for the individual unit, for the common areas. There are cleanup costs, negative externalities that folks are going to experience from barking or whatever. And there are costs associated with those things. So pet rent has always seemed like a very reasonable way of allocating those costs to the people who bring the pets to the properties. And frankly, I think renters should be able to have pets. I think we should be welcoming pets at every rental property in the country. I think that's great for everybody involved, but we should recognize there's costs involved. And so, if we want to allocate those costs to the people who are involved, it's the same as charging a toll on a highway. That way the people who are driving on the highway pay that toll instead of everybody else. And it seems reasonable to me, and I think fair.
You mentioned you're an economist by training. What led you to create Dwellsy?
Here's the wonky answer to that. It's a broken market. Fundamentally, rental housing in America is a completely broken market today. And what we're trying to do at Dwellsy is fix this broken market and make it work really well for renters and make it work really well for landlords. there is no reason this market, it's $550 billion in transactions a year, done with yard signs mostly. Like that's insane in this day and age. So what I saw when I was running a large portfolio of rental properties was that both from the renter perspective as well as from the landlord perspective, this market was failing everybody, and it seemed an opportunity to make that market work. And to your comment about my economics training, it goes back to my roots, and making a market work efficiently is very attractive to me.
Makes sense. And yeah, it is majorly broken. Let's talk about another broken part of it, which is imagery. Images for rentals, especially for single family rentals, they can be bad. There's a whole cottage industry of like Instagram and blog accounts dedicated to bad listing photos and especially bad rental photos. How do we start fixing that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question for a bunch of different reasons. When we started this at Dwellsy, one of our original hypotheses was we really needed to fix that. And what we're seeing is there's a ton of traffic flow to properties that might just have, a price and a location and a grainy photo and, maybe 2 or 3 other details about it. I think that in contrast to the for sale world where you're really selling a lifestyle, here, I think we need to find a different path to good photography and good description, which is it actually saves the landlord a lot of money in time. Because if you have good photography, that's a lot fewer phone calls you need to take. That's a lot fewer tours you need to give, because people can see in the photos, oh, this place doesn't look like my home, or it does look like my home, and they can really get a sense of it. And I think that's where the real value creation is here. Because, unlike staging a home and putting a ton of money where, people have argued you can get 5, 10, 15% or more in additional value out of, good staging and good photography, the margin with rentals just isn't there. So paying for expensive photography for a one-off rental rarely makes sense just on the rent alone. But I think it does save the landlord a lot of time. And those landlords who are trying to figure out how to show the place to 40 different folks, many of whom are not going to be interested once they open the front door, good photography can save them from a lot of that. And so that's what we've been trying to advocate for. And we've built a platform called Lightbox, which is a tool for landlords to be able to find great photographers who are interested in doing building photography near them. For as little as $75, you can get a professional to shoot your home for rental, which is then an asset that you have. If you're looking for a new mortgage or you're looking to share it with a new renter, there's a ton of reasons to have good photography of your place. And a great professional would be happy to do that work.
That's fantastic, because I feel like that's another problem. I've known some of the people at different companies like Planomatic, for example, that does photography around the country. There's never been a really great system for cheap photography for real estate. I had a friend in LA who was trying to build that. Curious of your take on how many photos you should have. I used to work at Realtor.com, so it was something that we debated and looked at data for, kind of endlessly. What's your take?
Depends on the type of property. For a single family rental, or your typical small multifamily where you don't really have any amenities at the property, I think you're talking a handful of outdoor photos. And some pretty detailed indoor shots. If you've got 20 pictures, you're probably in the right neighborhood for that. If you're in a big community with lots of amenities, you're going to want to show all the amenity photos and whatnot. Whether those are actually valuable is a whole other thing. People get pretty frustrated by seeing only amenity and model photos. Everybody wants to see the photo of the unit that they're actually going to see, that they would actually live in. They want to see the views from those windows. And most large multifamily folks are just not set up to provide that kind of detail, unfortunately, today. But hopefully we'll get better on that front as well. But it's one of the areas where we're working the numbers on our end to try to figure out what the optimal number of photos is. And as I mentioned, I've been shocked by how many inquiries come in for the places with only 1 or 2 grainy photos. And I think we're going to have to look at the metrics a little bit differently, because in our world, because we're not getting paid by the lead, we care deeply about having a good experience for the renter and a good experience for the landlord. And that means that the leads from the landlord perspective or the inquiries from the renter perspective need to be high quality. And if you're getting a ton of leads because you haven't provided any detail, those are going to be really low quality leads. And so that's not a great outcome for that landlord, to have a sea of people who aren't that interested that they have to wade through in order to find the good renters. Better to have a high quality lead.
That is a fantastic point, because that's absolutely true. It's great to get a lot of attention, but if it's not the quality attention, it's wasting everybody's time. What about search filters? Obviously, that's something that is very important. It's challenging, especially because now most people tend to be searching on mobile devices versus searching on desktop. That whole dynamic has changed things. How are you at Dwellsy thinking about search filters and adding and subtracting them?
Yeah, we've been really iterative on search filters. With more inventory than any other site, triage in some markets, and helping renters get down to a manageable number of listings is a material challenge. There's some markets where I look at and there's just not that many rentals, so it's really not that big an issue. But for other markets like Chicago, we have tens of thousands of available listings in Chicago, and you could look in one given neighborhood, we might have a couple hundred of options in that neighborhood. So the filters get really important there. The basics that are just critically important to people are location. Obviously, you need to be able to filter on that. You need to be able to filter on pet, which is a huge challenge. The structured data on pets is terrible. The places that will take small dogs. Well, what's a small dog? Is that a 20-pound dog, a 15-pound dog, a 35-pound dog? The breed restrictions, there's no data supporting breed restrictions at all. But there's so many communities that have breed restrictions because people have, a fear of a particular breed or another breed, and they just don't want to have that in the community because of irrational fears. So that's another thing that's a challenge. After that, it really gets very individual, down to the individual renter and what they're looking for. And we've tried to support that with, is internet speed really important to you? Okay, well, we'll have gig internet as an option, that kind of thing. And we'll try to have more and more of those over time. But, coming back to the landlords, most landlords are not that good at telling folks about their places and getting that data. So that's the other side of it, is there's no point having a lot of filters if you say, well, I only want places with gig internet, and only 10% of the places that have gig internet are telling you that they have gig internet. Then you're going to rule out a lot of good options for you. So that's the other challenge that we've wrestled with.
Interesting. So how do you solve that problem? Is it surveys and questionnaires? What is the way to get landlords to really think about the amenities that they have that they're not even putting on there?
Yeah, so what we're building is a set of AI tools that will basically start asking the involved parties, the renter who's interested in the place, who's submitted an inquiry. Maybe they found out about the internet, and we can ask them, does this place have gig internet? These things are worth money. If you offer gig internet, if you have a dishwasher, if you have, some of the things people are looking for that they might not be able to tell from your description, you can get more rent. And so, we'll provide a bunch of tools in time that help landlords fill in the gaps. And then once we know, the next time that place gets rented, we can ask again, we recommended that you install a dishwasher last time. Did you? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it makes me think about things like central air that maybe people don't, they neglect to put on there, but, in our increasingly warm environment, it's a very important factor. So last question for you. I feel like I have a sense of where you want to go with Dwellsy. Obviously, it sounds like, you want to get more and more listings, but what is the future plan for you, like 5 years out?
Yeah, it's our goal to really serve every renter and every landlord. and be, the destination where everybody is finding their next home. And everybody is able to find the renters that that they need in order to fill their property and keep them fully occupied, and to really have a highly liquid, high velocity marketplace that works well for all involved, and really makes renting a better experience in this country. That's the goal. If we can accomplish that, and then we've done what we set out to do.
Well, I think we all want that. Well, thank you so much for your time. A reminder to listeners, you can learn more at Dwellsy.com. You can always email us at media@millionacres.com to share your thoughts. Stay well and stay invested.
Thank you for tuning in to the Millionacres Podcast. I hope you liked today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing through your favorite podcast provider. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a line at help@millionacres.com. Stay well and stay invested. People on this program may have an interest in the deals, offerings, or services they discussed at Million Acres, or the Motley Fool may have a formal recommendation for or against. Always consult a certified tax professional before acting on tax advice, and do not buy or sell assets based solely on what you hear.